Brooke.
Hey, how are you?
I'm tired, you?
I feel that. Yeah, same. I'm feeling these last 2 weeks before Thanksgiving break, like powering through.
Hey, we only have a month left, right? Probably less than that.
Yeah, and a week of that almost is vacation. I'm just like trying to get to the next 2 weeks, and I'm like, okay, then you have a mini vacation. You get like short break, and then week of studying, and then finals week. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Are
You don't graduate this semester, right?
No, I graduate in spring. Are you also gonna graduate in spring?
No, I'm a junior.
Oh, really? I thought you were a senior.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm graduating. Well, technically, I should graduate in spring. I'm going to finish my CS program in spring, but my certificate is going to take me until the end of summer, and they won't let me You can't actually graduate until you finish your certificate program. I've recently learned. So I will be graduating at the end of summer.
What's your certificate program?
Teaching English as a foreign language. So very unrelated to CS, but I'm like, I mean, I guess I'll talk about it probably as part of this thing, but linguistics. So it's like tangentially related to what I want to do in grad school, but it's been fun.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to give people a couple more minutes to join, but if you that's meant to say sign up. But yeah, if you've never been to one of our GBMs before, you can sign up for our club here. Just ask some like basic info about you so we know who's in our club so we can help serve you better. And then you can actually sign into the event, which you have a point system so you can get credit for coming here. And then our Slido link, this is what one of the things we'll be using to ask questions of our panelists. So you can, I dropped the link in the chat, but I drop it again because I know it doesn't show you chat history, which is annoying. But yeah, you can go there or just to the Slido website with our event code and drop a question there. And you can also ask a question anonymously if that's something you want to do. But I'll be monitoring that and also the Zoom chat during this time.
I'm not sure if, Annabelle, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but for those of you guys who haven't been to one of our meetings before, Slido is where you can ask questions. I'm not sure, did you already say that? Okay. Ask questions for a panel. Sorry, I was like, I tuned out. My bad.
Yeah. Hi, Harold. Right. All right, then we go ahead and get started. So from events this Friday, we have a workshop with AI at UCF at 5 o'clock. It's going to be led by one of the, I think one of our panelists today is leading that workshop, or one of the members of the club. You'll find out. But yeah, that's going to be really good. This Saturday, we have another game night. Always a fun time. Next Monday will be another GBM. I know we normally have them every other week, but this one was originally supposed to be in October, but it got pushed because we all had midterms. So it's going to be next Monday. We're going to be talking about different topics in tech because it's such an incredibly wide field. Just something you'll also probably notice after listening to all the different things our panelists have been researching. So we're going to try and give you an idea of what all the different areas you could possibly study and work and look like. And then next Friday, the 20th, we are having our Life After UCF event, which we're going to have people who are either graduating this semester or potentially graduated talk about what life is like after you leave college. Big time. So, first panel stuff is just going to introduce everyone, but you can also introduce yourselves. Jon Rice, he's on this call.
Hey there, can you guys hear me?
Yep. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Awesome. Yeah, sure. So I used to be a student at UCF. I recently graduated 2 years ago there from a degree in comp sci. Before I left, I was doing research in the computer vision lab there. Afterwards, I started doing research for the Navy, where I'm at now. And most of my stuff is in deep learning, anomaly detection, machine learning.
Cool. All right. Next up, you have Brooke. Hey, Brooke.
Hey guys, I'm an officer in ACM-W, and I was a physics major before I did CS. So I worked in a physics lab at UCF called the Center for Microgravity Research, which was super fun. But I ended up deciding that physics was not my thing, and I moved to CS, and I got the opportunity to do a short-term research project for 2 months in Germany, and then write a paper afterward that we were able to publish. And I'm looking to go to grad school eventually. I'm a senior right now, and I'm hoping to go to grad school after taking a gap year for computational linguistics.
All right, thank you, Brooke. We have Arjun Pherwani. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Arjun?
Hey, wait, do you want me to turn on the camera?
If you want to.
All right, well, I am a junior here at UCF. I'm doing currently research at the Evolutionary Computation Lab. We're doing multi-agent systems. It's a little weird, but we do use genetic algorithms, so technically it does fall under that umbrella. We just submitted a conference paper. I can't tell you which conference, and I'm currently working on the journal paper, and also it's raining outside, so that's what that is. And also, yeah. I've been at this lab for about a year, and I might consider grad school depending on how things go.
Yeah, no one tonight's in the path of this tropical storm, right? We're not going to see you suddenly blink off. And
all day.
Yeah, but it's actually I mean, if you're out of the rain, it's actually quite pleasant outside.
Yeah. All right. And Brandon Silva.
Hi. And let me the camera here. All right, I think that's working. Yep. Hi, I'm Brandon Silva. I'm a senior. I'm graduating next summer, studying computer engineering, and I have a minor in intelligent robotic systems. So I originally started doing research in 2018 under Dr. Shah in the CRCV lab. So I had quite a few projects, and all of them were related from footage from UAVs. So like doing like action recognition, object recognition, and tracking. So I also did the RAU for in 2019 for CRCV, which I do recommend. It's a really nice RAU, and the application's super easy to do. They always accept UCF students, so it's a good thing if you're interested in doing research. To apply for that, because they'll teach you everything. They'll kind of get you up to speed with doing research in computer vision and stuff like that, so you don't need to have prior knowledge going in. And right now I'm working on, I left the CRCV lab in the end of last year, and now I'm working in with FSEC, which is called the Florida Solar Energy Research Center. And right now I'm using machine learning algorithms to do to do fault detection in solar panels. So be able to detect if faults happen, because sometimes it's really hard to detect minute faults, and also be able to predict when they will happen. So help improve, help fix faults before they happen, or when there's small percentage faults, and to be able to have the maximum output in the solar panel energy output.
Thank you very much. And now I think he just hopped on this call, so except Zaccy, I think I'm saying that right, Zaccy Scheffer.
Yeah. So I did my bachelor's here at UCF in physics and mathematics. Most of my research experience is in the physics department doing research with exoplanets. It's actually very close to the microgravity research lab. So in that group, I worked on streamlining a data pipeline for Spitzer for the Spitzer Space Telescope. Basically, we get telescope data, we perform photometry, do some model fitting, and try and figure out different parameters for the planet and find uncertainties on those parameters, like planet radius, inclination, all sorts of things like that. After that, I got accepted as an ORC fellow in Dr. Mubarak Shah's CRCV group. And now I'm working on a couple projects, one for action detection and recognition, and one for decoding brain representations. Lots of interesting stuff.
Zaccy, can I ask what professor you worked with in the exoplanet research?
Oh, well, so there's, I guess there was another one. I worked under Joseph Harrington.
Okay.
I'm guessing you
Yeah.
worked under, did you say, I'm guessing Addie or Josh?
Yeah, with Addie and Josh, yeah.
Okay.
So we were like right down the hallway. That's really funny.
Yeah. Did you do this like last year or?
No, this was, I guess, 3 years ago. So when I was a freshman, my freshman fall and spring. So I'm a senior now.
I see. So I was probably just starting as you were leaving.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I'm a first year PhD student. So this is my first semester as a graduate.
Cool.
All right, and last but not least, we have Jon Muchovej, I think, did join the call a couple minutes ago.
Yeah. Hi. So yeah, I did my undergrad at UCF. I finished last December in computer science, and so like my main focus, or my main foci were computer science and cognitive science. While I was an undergrad, I worked in the CRCV like Zaccy and Brandon have. So the Center for Research in Computer Vision, and I also worked in the NLP Natural Language Processing group at UCF. Yeah, and then so in between when I started it in the NLP group and when I finished last December, I spent a summer at MIT, essentially looking at whether or not deep learning models actually learned the concepts that they claimed to. Turns out they didn't. I can go into more detail about that later. But yeah, and so also like during that time, during my last semester at UCF, I spent a year with a team at UChicago building social simulations, which has its own like terrifying implications, but also really cool implications. But yeah, so I spent a year doing that, and then I finished that up in July or so, and I moved back to Cambridge in terms of focus. I'm now at Harvard, working on 2 projects relating to malicious compliance and understanding how humans perform search. I can elaborate on that in more detail if you want, but I don't know in terms of like time if we're pressed or not.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so then I'll elaborate really quickly. So malicious compliance is basically looking at like, so if you think back to high school, presumably, where like your English teacher may have, like you ask your English teacher, can I go to the bathroom? And then they look back at you and they clearly understand your query, but they say, I don't know, can you? And they interpret it as you're asking their assessment of your ability as opposed to asking permission. And so that's so that sort of idea is looking at malicious compliance. Maybe a more concrete example is when a parent says to their child, like, no more Xbox. And the child then goes and starts playing on their PlayStation or whatever. And so it's like, clearly, like, you knew what I meant, child. I said, I meant no more video games, but I only said Xbox. And because of that, I found this loophole. So that gets a broader idea of machines that do what you ask, not what you want. And so we're looking at, like, how do kids, like, what is that process like for kids? How might we actually get machines to mimic that behavior? And then hopefully by mimicking that behavior, maybe we can start taking steps towards getting machines to actually do a better job at understanding what we want, not necessarily what we ask. And so that's a fine line, but I can talk about that in more detail later on. And then how human search is basically like, if I ask you, or if I like point to a wall and I'm like, I want to put this nail further into the wall. And then I ask, what are some possible ways I can put this nail further into a wall? And if you respond with the year 1874, I'm going to look at you like, what on earth are you talking about? That doesn't even work. Like, you can't take a year, which is an abstract concept, to nail a physical, to like put a physical object in the wall. So the idea with that is that was something that presumably wasn't an idea that came to mind to most, if any, humans. And so the question there is like, why is it that you don't think of those as possible solutions, even though they're wrong? Like, they're sort of a different type of wrong, if that makes sense. And so what we're looking at with that is, how is it that in the space of all solutions that a human could answer, they don't actually like choose from that space? It seems like they choose from a subset of that space or a smaller portion of that space. So yeah.
All right. Not really much. That's all of our panelists. So again, you can go to Slido or drop your questions in the chat. I'm gonna stop my share for now. So first question I'll just ask all panelists, feel free to answer. Why did you decide to try research? Did you seek it out, or did it kind of fall into your lap?
Well, I'll go
I can
quick.
answer this. Oh, go for
You
it.
can all answer.
I'll go real fast. For me, it's just more, I enjoy exploring the unknown, not having the answer in front of me. I just enjoy finding out things, and research is really one of the places that you can do that. So you can go ahead, Brooke.
Thanks. Mine happened to be kind of a fun story. It's like kind of a coincidence how I got into research. I kind of thought I wanted to do research going in. Like, it was something that was always on my radar because one of my parents does research. And so I got kind of aware of it, but I went to a talk at orientation by Josh Colwell, who was a professor I ended up working for. And it was so interesting. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to do long term, like with the specific research he was doing, but I was like, that's kind of neat. Like, I want to learn more about that. And because specifically what I helped study at the Center for Anti-Gravity Research was collision and accretion. So like, how do planets form? Because like when they run, a lot of times when people run simulations of, the Big Bang onward, planets don't form, and we have to figure out like, why did they form in the first place? And it was kind of interesting. And so and then I forgot about that. My orientation was way before I started school, and I happened to be in UCF Compass, which I dropped 2 days after school started because I wanted a smaller math class. But I went to like an advising meeting for Compass, and my advisor was like introducing himself, and he's like, "Yeah, so I work for the physics lab." And I was like, "What physics lab?" And he was like, Josh Colwell. And I was like, "Can you get me in?" And I just happened to meet this guy who had an into this lab that I had like heard about months earlier. So that was very convenient, and I happened to like get into that very quickly. But that was really just total lucky chance. But also, like, I had known about Josh Colwell beforehand. So I guess two things, like, sometimes you just have to get lucky, but sometimes it's good to do your research. One of the things I've heard from many people is like, if you're interested in doing research, look up professors and look up what they're doing, and that's the best way to find out something that you're interested in. I'm just like starting to like spout advice now, so I'll stop. But that was how I got into research.
Do you mind if I go now? Okay, so well, in my freshman year, I was jumping around from lab to lab, asking if people wanted research assistants because I was interested in that. And all of them kind of said that come back when you actually know what you're doing. And so in my sophomore year, I had this friend Aiden, and John knows him very well. And he told me that Dr. Wu, who I do research with now, was looking for research assistants. So I went to her. She was like, do you want to start on this thing? And so I worked with her for like pretty much since September in my sophomore year to now. Well, to the end of spring, and then she just offered me an RU position in summer, which I accepted, and I'm still working for her.
So I guess I'll go ahead. I kind of got disillusioned from doing software engineering and didn't really want to do software engineering. Most of the things that I find interesting just didn't happen to do that. So then I started looking at so there was that. And then I think there was like some email that Charlize had sent out ages ago about some program at this company called Udacity. And so I ended up jumping in and I was like, hey, let me take the most advanced one they have, which was the machine learning one, which was a year's content, but we had 3 months to do it. And so once I did that, I was like, oh, this machine learning thing's pretty fucking cool. Oh, sorry. Pretty cool. And so because of that, I started getting more of an interest in machine learning research. And then I started looking at like what professors at UCF did that. Turns out that Dr. Shaw and a lot of his lab, and then Dr. Liu also do that. And then that's kind of like what ended up happening. I basically I read a few papers, wrote up some emails, but kind of like Brooke, I'm starting to spew advice. So I'll go ahead and stop. Yeah.
Okay, so I originally got into research because like I was thinking about grad school, but also you know, anytime I hear about interesting things going on in the world that would be awesome to contribute in, they're always at the cutting edge. And so in my mind, I believed that in order to do cutting edge things, I need to do cutting edge research if people are going to take me seriously. If I'm going to be able to find a project that I like and actually be able to contribute to it in a meaningful way.
For me, it was so way back when in 2018, or 2017 when I first came to college, I joined AI UCF, which was SIG AI at the time, and that ended up kind of sparking my interest in AI. And so after learning a bit and doing some courses online and stuff to learn some pretty much some basic like machine learning stuff mainly is what I was looking at. I decided to send an email over to some professor that worked in this is just a little bit funny, but a professor that worked in Dr. Shah's lab. I don't know if anyone actually remembers him, but what was the name? It was Ali Borgi, I think. Yeah, John's sitting here. He's going to be laughing because he likes this story. But anyways, for those of you who don't know, this guy, so right when I emailed him, it was like in the middle of the summer, like July, he got arrested for stalking a student. Yeah. So I didn't realize this. So I'm waiting for an email back. And then John sends me the news article and I'm like, oh, well, good thing I missed that horrible.
Dodge that bullet. Yeah.
Yeah, so I dodged a bullet there. So then I'm like, okay, so I sent an email right to Dr. Shah, and with pretty much the same thing. Like, I want to work in a lab. I want to do research. I have a lot of programming experience. I got some AI experience. So I ended up sending email directly to him, and he's like, okay, I like your resume and stuff. Come in for an interview, and started working with him after that. So in that September of that year. So yeah. And then went on to my track of doing everything I'm doing now.
All right. I think most of you answered this already, but if you didn't, anyone want to say how you got your first research position? I think most of you covered this in your answers, but I don't think Jon
Yeah, I
Rice
didn't cover that. Nope. So I basically approached professors. I found a whole bunch of professors that were doing research at the university, got a list of them, and I basically blasted an email to all of them after I already had a little bit of experience, just like taking the grad course and reading on a little bit of my own before I felt comfortable. And it was over at Dr. Shaw's computer vision lab that eventually took me in. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of us here from the computer vision lab.
I mean, we're a computer science club. Makes sense. But
Yeah, I mean the CRCV is pretty much like the main lab that do like any type of deep learning or machine learning research at UCF, the big one at least. I know there's Dr. What's her name, Faye, right, John? Dr. Faye's for the NLP, yeah, for natural language processing, and then there's evolutionary comp and a couple other ones.
There are a few others, but Shaw's lab has the most. It has the most prominent presence of all of the labs on campus, or rather, of all the like CS related labs. Yeah, so I think I had mentioned this, but I'll go ahead and mention it again. Most of it was started looking around like department website, trying to figure out who does what kind of research, read a few papers, and then mustered the courage to write an email and send it to them, and then cried silently while they took their time to reply. Yeah. So.
yeah, cold emailing people is scary.
It's a skill. Once you learn how to do it, it's easy, but learning how to do it is not always the most enjoyable experience. So
Sorry to butt in here, but I just want to stress the importance that like don't get discouraged if professors don't respond or professors deny you. It's not because of you're a bad candidate or anything. It's just maybe they don't have the space available in their lab or something like that.
Or the funding. Sometimes they're just like they think that you're going to want to be paid and get on the funding.
Yeah, so I started doing research. Originally, I was afraid to even ask people because I was pretty early on in my education. But then I went to the SPS, to a Society of Physics Students meeting, and they mentioned that that students do research all the time under these people, and it's expected that undergraduates don't actually know what they're doing, but that they're willing to learn and put in the effort. So I literally just went to the chair of the physics department. Sorry. I asked if I could meet with him at some point, and he was free right then. And I asked him how to get involved, and I told him what I was interested in. And then he said, I told him I wanted to do something coding, something more CS heavy. And then he said exoplanets and coding. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds amazing. And then so he sent me over to Joseph Harrington, and I went to him, and I was just like, yeah. At the time, I was actually a CS major, but I ended up switching to math and physics pretty quickly. But yeah, I just told him what I sent him what classes I've taken, what grades I got in those, and he just looked it over and he's like, yeah, go ahead and show up to a meeting, and then that's how it started. I will say, if you guys are looking for research groups to join, telling them that you just want to show up and you don't even expect to be paid, that definitely does open a lot of doors. And if you prove yourself as being someone who's important to the research group, then they'll shell out the money. Like professors, even if they don't have grant money, they have this thing called an overhead. So they don't have the money, but then as soon as they need you, for instance, if you start doing system administration for a professor, then they really can't let you go. At which point, they'll start paying you.
I'll second two things there. One, I was very surprised in my research experiences and the internships I had, how little I'm expected to know. I was so worried going in. I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to know more than me. I'm going to be a failure. And most places will really teach you, unless it like says in the application, you need to know this, like don't lie about what you know. But a lot of places are really willing to teach you things. And like this isn't research, but my boss, my internship was like, he had to tell me straight out, we're paying you to learn things, like, because I was stressed that I wasn't being productive enough. Really, people are aware that we're students. We're not supposed to be, professional society's experience. And the other thing was, I didn't realize that I could get paid as an undergraduate for research, really. At first, I thought there were only volunteer positions ever. And so I started at that physics lab under the total assumption that I was never going to be paid. And I worked as a volunteer for a semester. And then I went to the professor and he asked me offhand one time, how much are we paying you? And I was like, nothing, I'm a volunteer. And he was like, we need to change that. So really, like, if you, Zaccy is totally right. If you start out as a volunteer and you make yourself useful, oftentimes you will get paid. Who knew?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much any professor, when they bring on an undergraduate student, knows that you're an undergraduate student and you're not gonna know everything. They expect to work with you and help you learn and things like that. So don't feel bad if if you feel like you're underqualified, because because 9 times out of 10 you probably are pretty underqualified. That's okay, because that's kind of the point.
Yeah. When I started working, my task at the beginning, like even while I was being paid, my task was to read papers and ask questions to people in the research group. And this is like a data analysis group that does everything on a Linux machine. I had used Windows my entire life. I've since ascended, of course. That was supposed to
The
be a joke.
Emacs OS.
I actually had too many memory leaks, so I switched to i3. I mean, I
Good.
still use Emacs, but yeah.
Anyways,
yeah, like it was literally just reading research papers, and then anytime I had to do anything, I had to have someone sit next to me and tell me how to type shell commands. Like, I didn't know CD, LS, like that was like next level stuff. Typing things into a terminal to do things, like, it blew my mind. And I had absolutely no idea what was going on to start out with. But I mean, eventually you just immerse yourself, and you very quickly, when you do something for a job and you do something outside of class and you dedicate real time to it, it's a much better way to learn, and it's much more scalable. Like, when you're in classes, you're getting spoon-fed information. In the real world, everything beyond school that you learn is going to be, you're looking at documentation, you're reading research papers, and then you're putting things together and figuring them out. And that's what I think is important to get out of doing things like undergraduate research.
Zaccy, I relate. That's personal experience for me too.
Right. It seems like most of you did research while being a student. Were you full-time, part-time while doing that, and was it difficult to manage doing research and your classes?
Would you mind if I take that, because I'm actually doing that right now?
Go ahead.
In a sense, it was, yes. I remember that when we were actually when the deadline for our publishing, or the conference paper deadline, was coming up, 2 or 3 nights we didn't sleep, and so what you have to do, you just have to learn time management. You just have to, if you're at group projects, then do your part beforehand, so you're not holding your team back, because in research, especially when your deadlines are coming up, there's always more work than you expect there to be. So it really you take care of your class stuff first, and then dedicate as much time as you can to make sure that you're good with your research as well.
Yeah, I would say sorry, I didn't interrupt you, right? You were done? Okay, cool. One big benefit of doing, working on research, if you're going to be working somewhere while studying, one big benefit of doing research as an assistant researcher is that they're aware that you're taking classes, right? If you're working for your local Publix, like I don't know work for Publix. Maybe Publix is great about that, but I'm just I named a random company. Like, they might not be willing to work around your schedule, but when you're working for a professor at your university, they're obviously aware of, oh, it's finals week, okay, you might not be in as many hours, or hey, you tell them, I've got a big test coming up in this class, I might not be in as much. And as long as you're not doing that all the time, they're really willing to work with your schedule, and it's much easier to just kind of come in when you can versus any other job. So that's kind of a benefit. And yeah, I think it's definitely doable. Sometimes I do way too much, so definitely wouldn't recommend like working and doing research and classes like I did. No bueno. But it's definitely doable, research and classes, as long as you're not taking like 7 classes. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think going on what Brooke said, your primary occupation, even when you're doing research as an undergraduate or your primary occupation is a student. So your GPA is one of the most important things they look at. So you have to make sure that you're up to date with all your classes.
So I don't intend, like, I'm not intentionally countering that. If you're looking at doing grad school, your most important things, at least up here, have been your letters of rec. I've met professors that take on the mindset of, if you have a 4.0, you didn't do enough research. But like the point is obviously, yeah. So if you have a 4.0, you didn't do enough research. The assumption there is basically, as long as you maintain like a 3.5 on your GPA, wherever you go, you're pretty much fine for grad school. It's not really going to count against you. Once you start dipping below a 3.5, it does get to be pretty bad, but it's not, as long as you stay like, as long as you're above a 3.0, they're not really going to question you. There are other ways to counterbalance that. So like you could work quite a bit towards making sure that you get near perfect scores in the GRE or something like that to counterbalance any like GPA filters they have. But normally your letters of rec are the most important things that you can get. And in some cases, like for instance, I'm pretty sure Brandon can echo this, Dr. Shaw, when he says like, oh, I want 10 hours a week out of you, it's debatable if it's actually 10 hours a week. It's closer to like 30 or 40.
That's true for a lot of
and 40. That's easy. What do you mean, like 60, 70?
Right. Yeah. So that's another thing. So like estimating engineering time is actually like, I've learned is like an amazing skill, and most professors suck at it. So like, don't take their like idea of, oh, I only want 10 hours a week out of you. Don't take that at face value. There's probably going to be more to it. But it's very rare that it's not worth it. Because in the end, the letters of rec are typically what will make or break your application, as well as like what kind of research have you done, how impactful were you in the research you did. A sad reality, or one could argue it's sad, but like a reality of most computer science is if you do things that are computer science related, there is like this weird expectation that you have published papers before you graduate from undergrad to have a better shot at getting into the grad schools that you want. I say it's a weird expectation because of the way that grad school used to be structured. We can talk about that more. I wouldn't really let that like terrify you, because I have met plenty of people that it is a terrifying like idea that you have to be published. It's actually a fairly low bar in terms of professors know what's going to get published. So that's what they're going to spend their time on, because they're in a similar situation, especially when you have non-tenured faculty like Dr. Liu. She needs publications and she needs undergrad mentorship to be able to get tenure so that she can secure her job. So it's something where she's very aware of that. And so she'll be working towards getting like writing papers that will get published and working on ideas where it's very likely that she'll get published. So yeah, that might have just been like yeah.
Oh, sorry, continue.
No, you can go ahead.
I was gonna ask you a question. When you say that they expect people to have published papers before grad school, do they count conference papers?
Mm-hmm. So normally the idea for science is like publish in a journal, because if you don't publish in a journal and you publish in a conference, like that's a subpar thing. With engineering, it's actually weirdly flipped. So you can like publishing in journals still maintains like that degree of like pedigree, but it's more important but like the pace at which engineering moves, journals can't keep up. Because journals, like depending on the journal that you go to, like some are quarterly, some are annually, and then you might have some that are monthly, but those are the only real, like those journals tend to be the ones where you have a better chance of getting in terms of having like an adequate turnaround. But normally if you have conference papers and you're applying like from a computer science background, you're good. It shouldn't be much of an issue. And that's almost typically what they tend to expect as well anyways. So yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
So yeah, I mean, that's not to like, the whole point of bringing that up was like, it's okay if your GPA slips. It's basically, don't let it slip too much. So don't drop into the twos. If you can avoid the low threes, so low threes, 3 to 3.5, if you can avoid that, that's great. If you can't, but you're right around a 3.4, you should, or sorry, a 3.5, you should be generally fine. Because your letters of rec are going to go above and beyond for that. And letters of rec, especially from external institutions, so like summer programs and the like, those are going to mean a lot more than your GPA, because they're now asking people of approximately equal caliber to assess you as a researcher. And that's what they care about, is whether or not you can produce like research output. Are you a good researcher? And there's a very weak correlation between academic performance and research capacity. At least that's what most places that I'm aware of have seen. So yeah.
Thanks, John. I didn't know that. Thanks for letting me know. I mean, it's like for me,
it's not an excuse to let your grades drop, but
obviously.
yeah. So yeah.
And then also from a time management perspective, one thing I did was I fused a lot of my coursework from projects with the research I kind of wanted to do. So for my senior design project, it revolved around that. The graphics class I took, I made it revolve around that as well. So it's one thing you can do as well.
Yeah.
Simplify and kind of combine the time.
Yeah, you're a PhD, right? You have any insight on grad school stuff? Did you get a master's first, or just go straight to PhD?
For me, no, I have 2 undergrads. I have an undergrad in philosophy and then a second undergrad in computer science. Yeah. But I did TA for the grad class in computer vision.
Same. Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. I don't know if anybody's mentioned it, but like for graduate applications, you should probably take some time to actually take a grad class, especially if you can afford it. They're actually really fun. They're not, so like, I guess this might be an overgeneralization, but like undergrad, it's normally, hey, I'm going to talk at you for 50 to 75 minutes. Grad classes, I've yet to take one where okay, I'll amend that. Most of the grad classes I've taken have not been like that. They've normally been, hey, we're going to read a paper. You've got a week to read it. Come in next week and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to dissect the paper. But that's what the class is mostly centered around, is it's not much of the professor lecturing you. It's having discussions and trying to work through like, what were the authors trying to do? What are failure modes of the paper that you're looking at? Where did the authors like make incorrect leaps if they did, and so on. So those classes tend to be more fun than undergrad classes, just like because they're more stimulating. But yeah.
Another important note on taking graduate courses, if any of you guys have Bright Futures, and you can actually get Bright Futures to cover the full amount of the graduate course if you get an advisor to write an advisor to write a letter to the financial aid office saying that this graduate course will satisfy a requirement for your degree, and it'll totally cover it. It's free. I mean, assuming you have the highest level. Otherwise, it'll
scale.
Yeah, it'll scale. So Bright Futures, if you have that, just know that is on the table. So if you haven't taken all of your electives, then you can fill up your electives with interesting graduate courses, and plenty of people do it.
For computer science, you want to talk to Jenny Shen about that. Just as in case anyone's thinking about that for the spring.
All right, so we've talked a lot. It seems like all you guys mostly got into researching positions from just like emailing professors that do research and being like, hey, whatever that email equivalent
So-
of that is. So, any advice on cold emailing professors?
So
Just do it.
something that something that I would like kind of add to that is if you know people in the lab, get them to recommend you if they're willing to. There have been like the positions that I have up here, it's because I knew people in the labs. I would not it's not so much like only because of that, but they most likely helped a lot more than I've actually seen in terms of getting people up here to pay attention to someone from a state school. And same idea with like labs at UCF. If you know people in the lab, it's generally a good thing to get them to talk to the professor about you. They're more inclined to look at their email, especially because they get like, if anyone thinks that Charlize sends you a lot of emails, they get like 10 times that amount on a daily basis. Yeah, it's pretty bad for them, but yeah. I don't know if anyone else had like comments on cold emailing. I can dig into that if you want.
Yeah,
but
one thing is when you have those lists of professors that you're interested in, or possibly the topics that you're interested in, I would suggest reading a paper from their lab and maybe being able to use some of those keywords that for the kind of work and the topics that they cover, and talk about how maybe you have passion in that area. And I think that would make them a lot more receptive if they see that you have on yourself gone out to read some of those topics.
Yeah.
and there's also okay. No, go ahead, Brandon.
a few things, or at least a few pieces of advice is to keep it pretty concise, because professors usually get a lot of emails. To add on to like what Jon and Jonathan have said, but there's also expressing interest in like what they're researching and actually being knowledgeable, like saying, like talking about what they're doing is important. So at least, and they'll also mention any experience you have, because then it shows like you actually care about what you're doing. That's a very important point. I want to reiterate that, because that is really important to show that you actually care, not to say like, hey, AI is pretty cool, I want to, let's see, like, they're not gonna, that doesn't really inspire confidence. And another thing too is don't be afraid to like to, if they don't reply, to like kind of forward the email and be like, hey, did you see my email? Or don't be afraid to do that, because sometimes, or I mean usually very often they will miss email, so like it's okay to like send them another email to follow up after a couple of days, a couple of business days, so like during the week, probably not the weekend, but to just say like, hey, did you get my email? Is there any
Yeah, I had one respond 6 months later that they wanted to give me a research spot.
Was that the UCF
Yeah.
financial aid office?
So to kind of like piggyback off of what Brandon was getting at as well, for emailing people, the two things that I just posted, Mailspring or Canary, both of those are email applications that will forcibly give you a read receipt. And so the rationale behind that is if you force them to give you a read receipt, you'll get a notification that they opened the email. The rationale there is like, if they opened the email and they didn't really respond, then it's possible that they're not interested in. But the idea there is like, then you can do a better job at estimating like T+3. So like email them like 3 days later or something like that. And because there are cases where like they'll open the email and then they'll come back to it 2 days later to respond to you, as opposed to responding right then and there. Yeah, another thing that might slightly counter what Brandon was getting at. For an undergrad, you don't necessarily need to be super concerned about being knowledgeable, as long as you're like in line with what Brandon's saying, not saying, hey, I think AI is dope and this is why I want to join your lab, because that's too generic. But you definitely don't need to say things like, I'm curious about how to make online policy learning more efficient than it already is. That's a graduate level like statement in some degrees that could actually be a PhD. So you don't need to be that specific. So yeah, but something in between of just like, I'm really interested in, like in the case of computer vision, I'm interested in how to use computer vision to better diagnose to better inform medical diagnoses or something like that. That's generally enough, because they're not, like we've been saying, they're not going to expect you to know much, if anything at all. If you have supporting coursework and the like, that's great, but they don't really expect it. So
Another important thing is that people have different preferred modes of communication. So while a lot of professors, maybe they will only communicate you via email, a lot of them, maybe even most of them, are unreliable with respect to emails. Another thing to take into account is that there's a lot of professors that just love to talk about their research. So while emailing and trying to ask via email if you can join their research group isn't a bad thing, I definitely would recommend first trying to knock on their door, see if they have time. And if they do, ask them about their research. And if you're really trying to slide in, ask if you can observe a research meeting. Because like they haven't, obviously they're not making any commitment to, you know, like they're not making any commitment to pay you. And if you're asking to observe and say like, you know, and you advertise yourself as a volunteer researcher, then it's a lot of times they're like, this person seems really interested, if they're going to not only not get paid, but also just like they I think it shows a degree of intelligence that you as an undergraduate who, you know, let's be real, you probably don't know shit about what's going on in a research group, that you want to go and make sure that you are interested in it before trying to go whole hog. So yeah, asking to observe, I think, is effective. And also professors, maybe there's professors that just are really busy and they just don't want to talk to students. But by and large, professors love to talk about themselves. Ask them about their research, and you know,
yeah,
they love themselves. They think, oh man, I'm hot shit. And this kid wants to hear about how awesome I am. Oh, I'll tell him about how awesome I am. And then like, oh, this person, because as soon as you show that you think that they're awesome, then they like you a little bit more. And then you ask them, oh, can I observe? And they're like, oh, there's no strings attached. Of course you can come observe and come see if you're interested in my awesome group that you so astutely have noticed is amazing. Like
It's pretty accurate. If people are doing research on something, chances are they really like talking about it. So if you get them to talk about it, you learn something and you get a little bit of benefit there.
Yeah, and also if you say observing, it's also true that like it actually probably is the case that you don't really know how much you're interested in that group. So observing gives you the chance to go there, and then ideally you you know, you ask questions. Maybe if they're really busy, you don't ask during, but after the fact, maybe like you're taking notes as you go, and then you know, you ask questions.
and especially like as an undergrad, if you're talking to like the PhD students or the postdocs or even master's students, those are going to be the people that you're going to work with anyways. So if you capture like one of them, like if one of them is like, oh, you seem interesting as a human or like as a person or whatever, then you can also like in an email later on, if that's your only way of contacting them, like now it might be, you can always get that particular person to start vouching for you. And that's kind of like, I've met some people that, so this might be targeting some of you, I hope it's not, but like I've met some people that believe that like research isn't this social thing, and researchers talk to each other just as much as they do research, or even more. Research is, it's way more about sharing ideas and talking to people and effectively just networking than it is about anything else. Which like kind of blows people's bubbles to bits. Yeah, and the other thing, so this might dissuade some of you. If you don't like writing and you want to do research, learn to like writing because you're going to do a lot of it. But to kind of like piggyback off of what Zaccy was saying, if you can't for whatever reason like find some time to go and talk to the professor, in terms of like they're always saying like, oh, I'm busy, look at their office hours. Their office hours are open doors to all students, not just their classes. And they're required as teaching faculty to have office hours. So that's always an easy way in, unless they happen to be like as populated as Sean's office hours are. But I think Sean's office hours are as populated as they are in part because of the course load he has, as opposed to like, because he also does research, because he doesn't. Most researchers that I've met, like their office hours aren't really that packed. So you should be fine. But
most UCF professors publish their office and their office hours online on the UCF website. If you just Google a professor's name and then UCF, you can usually find it. And if not, just find a friend who is in one of their classes.
They also have it on, it's normally on like, so where their door is in the building, there's a placard.
I mean,
Yeah,
most people,
right.
a lot of people aren't in Orlando, so you can't go in person.
Might be hard to just show up.
Yeah, it's COVID times. Can't go in to meet them.
Right.
Yeah. Professors are probably also at home holding office hours from Zoom.
True that.
But
True.
Maybe.
Hopefully
They might
next
also
year.
just be doing appointment office hours, but
yeah.
Yeah.
You could always try going to the CS Discord during the class channel, bothering them to find out what that professor's office hours are.
it's not a terrible idea as long as you survive the CS Discord.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Just want to say something.
No, sorry.
Okay. So people want to know, how can you find a research experience for undergraduates at RU for the summer? Any resources you would recommend?
Oh
So-
yeah, you could go, sorry.
No, you don't.
Can I go then? Yeah, so RU research experience for undergrads is an NSA thing, NSF thing, sorry. NSA is a totally different thing. But they have this website where they have all their things, all their applications, all the opens websites, all the research projects they're sponsoring on. I would recommend check it out now and get your application ready. The applications don't usually open till January, February. And I mean, are not open, but at least aren't due till that time. So you have a little bit of time, but I would recommend check out what you want to do now.
Yeah. So for REUs, it varies by REU, like what the actual application process entails. Like the one that I did for the CRCV is like probably one of the easiest ones ever. It's like a Google form and it takes like 5 minutes. It's just like a very basic, like what's your GPA? What's your major? Tell us a little about yourself. Like they don't ask for letters of rec and stuff. A lot of REUs will ask for like letters of recommendation, I think, and some other qualifications and things like that, or like resumes and things like that. But like the CRCV one is like, pretty simple. So I don't really have experience applying to the other ones, but I know there usually are a little bit more involved than the CRCV one. But anyways, yeah, so I mean, because you could do REUs, like you're not this, like, I guess you don't only have to go to like UCF either. Like you can do an REU anywhere. REUs accept applications from all over. Usually they're encouraged to accept out of state or out of college students. So, don't be just focused to like just one or two schools if you don't mind like going, flying somewhere and living somewhere for a couple of months for the summer. So yeah, so I mean, there's and they'll pay you. I mean, I don't think there's any REU that you don't get paid. They'll pay for your living expenses, wherever you're living, food, transportation. You also get a stipend if just like money, just that's your money to pay. So I know the CRCV REU, they up their how much they're giving out actually. You get like a 6,000 at least for this one over this summer for 2020. It's like a $6,000 I think stipend that you just get like flat out. You get 6,000, and then on top of that you get like weekly allowance for like food and other things and like rent and other expenses and things like that. So like you get you do get quite a bit of money for doing the REO depending on like where you go. So yeah, there's some things I don't so John's posting some resources for about where to like kind of find REUs and things like that, but you can also just go to like the college and just search like REU for whatever college and see what they have available.
Yeah, so the stuff that I posted is from an old like semi-finished slide deck. Just look at that slide, ignore the rest. But The
That link
external
is
summer
broken.
programs list. What
The link is broken. Second one you sent is broken.
is it? Oh no, because that place used to be great. What? Okay, hold on. I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Get
Basically,
the
it
Wayback
aggregated.
Machine.
Yeah, it aggregated all kinds of stuff. So give me a sec to pull up the Wayback Machine, but it's the only snapshot of it. Okay. Is that the right? Yeah, that looks like it.
Yeah, the
Sweet.
whole site's still live, just I guess that one link changed, but if you just go to the base site.
Yeah.
you can explore.
So I'll change the link on it now, but yeah. Yeah, so that actually has the summer program that I was part of over the summer. So last summer, which was MIT MSRP, or rather MSRP Bio. They're slightly different, but yeah, they have a whole bunch of other REUs. They link all of the NSF REUs as well. The NSF site's a little unwieldy to go through, and also what you end up looking at least if what I'm talking about is the same thing as what Arjun's talking about, you end up looking at the grant proposal, not necessarily the REU. And so the grant proposal normally has a bunch of jargon, which is kind of difficult to understand, but the site that Annabelle linked should be good in terms of showing you both NSF official REUs as well as unofficial REUs. For anyone who's an international student, if there are any here, you're not going to be able to do the NSF REUs. They have an American citizen requirement, but you will be able to do the REUs at private institutions. So like Princeton, Harvard, etc. A lot of those, some of them are first time research and it's completely fine. Others require that you have prior research experience and you have at least one or more recommendations from researchers. I wouldn't let that like scare you in any way. All that means is that the program, especially for the ones that have the research requirement, those programs are going to give you a lot more in terms of the side effects that you get by going to those places, I guess, if that makes sense. I can elaborate on that later, but yeah, some of them also just aren't listed. Wait, okay, yeah. So some of the so that REU list, if it's the same as it was before, it'll have NSF and non-NSF ones. The ones at private universities are normally non-NSF. They fund it themselves. Another thing that you could look at is getting into programs like McNair. Here, McNair and RAMP. So I think that's the right link. If it's not, it's academic advancement programs. Basically, if you're able to get into those, one of the things that they do is they push pretty hard for you to do research over the summer, especially McNair. And they also make the like financial logistics a lot easier on the host institution because they're providing funding for you. But the point is that McNair pushes really hard to get you to do research over the summer and to get you to do research at a non-UCF institution. The reason why I can go into the reason why that matters. I don't know if there are like further questions about grad school later. If there are, then I can wait. But yeah.
Go for it, John.
Okay. So the rationale is to like why non-UCF recommendations matter. So let's say that you want to go to, so like, okay, being realistic, there's this ranking system for universities, right? In the sense that like Harvard, Stanford, University of Washington, even, and places like that, they're all considered either better, equivalent tier, or in some cases worse. So if you want to go, so let's say that you want to go to Yale. everyone that's applying to Yale very likely also went to equivalently tiered places. And so most of their letters of rec are going to be from those places. And as nice as researchers can be as people, they're very, they scrutinize your application. And part of
I
that
think the word
comes
you're
from
looking
like,
for is elitist.
I would say yes, if you don't know them as people. Like once you know them as people, it's like, no, they're not. But yeah, their behavior comes off as very elitist. And so like, sadly, research is not free of politics. And because it's not free of politicking, you have to play a game, and it's a very annoying game. But that game involves getting letters of rec from hopefully equal tier institutions. So like if you want to apply to Yale, having a letter of rec from Stanford, let's say, will go above and beyond on your application when otherwise you would have only potentially had UCF or something like that. And that's not to say like, if you want to go to Yale, you have to have letters of rec from like Stanford or anything else. It could be other institutions, as long as it's research institutions that are regarded as equal or better than UCF. And so that does, hopefully that doesn't like put a damper on anyone's hopes. I'm just trying to be like as realistic as possible with this. Because I'd rather you have real expectations than, and be able to take steps towards making them a reality, as opposed to hoping that this is enough and then like getting slapped in the face by any institution you apply to. But yeah, so if you want help with that or anything like that, then you can feel free to like ping me afterwards on Discord or something like that. But yeah.
All right, we're coming towards the end of our time, so I'll ask all of you, can you answer this? What's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out in research or starting applying?
I already said mine. Yeah, I mean, I already said mine. They don't expect you to know anything, and they'll pay you for it.
I think the biggest thing is you don't have to stick with one professor or feel like you're obligated to stay in one lab, because that's kind of how I felt in the CRCV lab. Even though I realized that I don't know if this is something I want to continue doing, but I stuck with it because I felt like, like, well, what else am I going to do? And it ended up not doing too good for me. So like, don't feel like, if you feel like this isn't the lab or this isn't like working for you, just be honest with your professor. They'll appreciate that. Then just, you just trying to force yourself to be in a lab or do something and have like lower quality work because of that. So just be honest. And it's okay to leave a lab and go somewhere else if you just don't want to be there.
I would say the earlier you start, the better. Kind of like building inertia or understanding what you like, what works, what doesn't work, and figuring out all those individual pieces and basically building that portfolio where you become more attractive to professors or graduate programs or labs and anything like that.
So I would say that research is great, but you should also do some personal projects of your own in your own time, because those really, those are self-directed and those really stand out because you're doing them on your own. No one is telling you to do anything, and it really shows your passion.
I would say I think it's important to try to be exposed to more than one research group. You might start one research group early on and think that, oh, this is amazing. And then towards the end of your undergraduate career, you sort of lose interest in it. And you never really find out if, you should have been doing something else. And another thing is something I didn't know early on, and this is true at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. The department that you do research in does not need to be the same that you are a student under. For instance, like I started doing research in physics as a CS undergraduate, and that goes for a lot of different things. There's, especially if you want to do research in computers, or if you are if you want to take courses in computers, computers are used everywhere. There's a lot of overlap. Basically, every field is going to have something, computer related as far as hard sciences go. So really, I think it's important to do what you are interested in, because it's going to be a lot of hours of your life. It may be the rest of your career. So find what you're interested in and make that the center of it. Like I said, you can mix and match. You can be a student in one and do research in the other, as long as you can find a professor that will take you. And honestly, like if it makes sense to you that these two fields have overlap, there probably is overlap, and there probably is a place for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the projects that I did was actually for a biology lab, doing computer vision for mosquito wings. They had over like 10,000 wings that needed to be measured, and it was taking their researchers too much personal time. And so I helped build a computer vision platform or application using deep learning to like automate that process. And they included me in the paper and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I will say one last thing. I don't know if everyone's on before I say something.
Sure.
Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't like going before anyone else. Please don't get stuck with a professor who doesn't care about you. I have not had this experience personally. I've gotten very, very lucky that your professor is constantly putting things off, and like you've been working on research and they say they're going to publish a paper with you, and then they are like, actually, we're going to put that off another year, and then they do that again, and they are putting themselves on your paper when you've done the work. You need to advocate for yourself, please, especially to all my lady scientists out there. Advocate for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. And I have friends who have had, I'm not going to say which professors, but it's been at UCF, and they've had professors treat them really terribly and cause them to take more years to get a degree than they should have had to do, that they could have done faster with another professor. So please pay attention, talk to your friends who are in research, see what their situation is like. Please talk to other people about what's going on in your research lab. Ask if you're not sure if this is normal behavior, like for a professor that you're working for. Please talk to people, because don't get taken advantage of, please.
All right, unless any of our panelists have anything else to add, I think that concludes our presentation. If you guys have any living room questions or are interested in any of these panelists' more individual experiences, I think most of them are in our Discord. Brooke definitely is. She's our sponsorship director, and either in our Discord or in AI UCF. So they seem friendly. I'm sure they'll probably answer you if you ping them.
One last thing that I would add really quickly. So kind of along the lines of what Zaccy was saying, you definitely don't need to worry about being in the same field when you're doing research. Even for the soft sciences, so like sociology, anthropology, there are people that are trying to do computational work, not necessarily at UCF, but point is that computational work is getting more and more integrated into everything. And there are even programs. So let's say you want to do computational biology. Coming from a computer science background, that will actually do you more good at differentiating yourself in a graduate application than coming from a biology background, because learning how to build computational models is a lot harder than learning the biology that's required for what you're modeling. Because most of our machines can't actually do all of the modeling that's necessary. So they're still like dealing with things on very small scales. Another thing as well to consider, like kind of bouncing off of what Brendan said, was for grad school, you need 3 letters of rec. So the more so you should definitely have at least 1 letter that is going to be like as strong as you can get it. You also have to have one that comes from your home institution. So point is like that sort of serves in this idea of go to multiple labs, and if it feels like you might be betraying a professor because you're spending your time in another lab, that's probably fine. As long as you're doing summer programs are probably the best way to get a really quick dose of another field that may not be at UCF, as well as to, in almost every case, secure a letter of rec and depending on the kind of work that you're doing, also get a publication out of it. That's like the perk of doing computational work. It normally takes 4 to 6 months to do a research project, as opposed to like actual biologists where it takes them sometimes 5 years to go through one experiment that actually leads to a paper. So, yeah.
All right. Well, all the questions we have. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for coming on tonight and sharing your experiences. I've learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of our other guests have. And don't forget, we have our AI workshop this Friday.